Hello my friends, in this video we are going to make a Midlane tier list for patch 26.16. This tier list is mainly for SoloQ. If you have any questions regarding competitive or anything, feel free to reach out to me. Who am I to tell you though? I was a full-time pro player, reached Challenger the past 5 seasons, and now let's go straight into the video. So starting off with Z tier, or basically the champions that you could always just pick and they will be pretty broken. I don't think there currently is a champion on mid lane. The 2 patches before it was Locke, but this champion actually got nerfed, so I would say Locke is not a Z tier champion mehr and rather as blind pick champion now. Then there's something that we call tempo mids, so mid lane champions that can basically just push out waves or push waves really fast and then move somewhere. In my opinion, Ari is a really good champion to do that right now. Same thing is kind of for Ryze. So these 2 blind picks are kind of tempo mids that are pretty good right now. Then we're still having Cassio. Cassio, for example, is really good into Ryze or into basically anything that is kind of close range or is not outranging her at least. And then we're still having Victor. Victor, for example, is also flexed a lot in competitive, but I also think this champion is in solo queue pretty good. And then another mage that we have is Syndra. In my opinion, Syndra is pretty good on mid lane. You can just chill in most of the matchups. You have a lot of tools later on. You have insane scaling, and that's why I think Syndra is still a good pick on mid lane as blind. Then when it comes down to counter picks, there are, in my opinion, a lot of champions that simply counter specific champions. So let's say, for example, Akali is really good into Orianna or into Locke. This champion has insane angles, especially in solo queue. Then we're having Galio. Galio, for example, is really good if the enemies pick double mage on for example, top and mid lane, because then on side lane you will always have a really good time. Then, in my opinion, also a really good counter pick is Tryndamere. There are a few players on EOS server that actually play this champion into any sort of melee champions. Let's say the enemy's blind Silas and you get a good Tryndamere angle, then feel free to go for it. Lissandra is more of a competitive champion, I would say, because this champion only provides CC and lockdown, but especially into any sort of melee champs again, or if the enemy is blind Z or something, you just want to pick lockdown. And then Lissandra is actually becoming a really good counter pick. Same thing for kinda Swain. It's this champion is really beefy, and if you are actually having a playable laning phase, I think this champion can be insane. You just need to be careful about giving the enemies not a free Silas angle. So probably this champion is not blindable at all. If the enemies get Silas, I think they will be pretty happy with it. Anivia, really good counter pick into Ryze, for example. We always see this in competitive. I think Anivia is cock blocking a lot of champions really hard that have no mobility. Then more of a solo queue or fully solo queue champion is Kassadin. In my opinion, Kassadin is still really insane solo queue. If the enemy team has no lockdown at all and you have a good matchup for it, you get free scaling, then go for it. And the last one when it comes to counter picks is Vladimir. I think Vladimir is the same thing again. If you're really good on him and a lot of OTPs are playing Vladimir in solo queue, I think this champion has insane potential. Then let's go with A. We have Akshan. My reasoning for Akshan only being A tier is that Akshan actually has a lot of matchups that are completely unplayable. Like Sinnoh, for example. I think you cannot do anything as Akshan. Yeah, but I think this champion is a solo queue monster. Obviously you can go invis, you can just push waves, you can move anywhere, you get the reset mechanic on your passive. So yeah, if he wouldn't have that bad matchups, then I would say he's a S pick, but in my opinion he's A, and that's completely fine. The next one is Aurora. I think simply a decent champion. There are better options for sure on mid lane that are simply doing the same thing as Aurora is doing. The next one is Silas. Silas is really insane if you get good matchup. Victor, for example, is a good matchup for Silas. And also if you're having insane ultimates from the enemies. I don't know, Maokai ultimate Vi or whatever you think in that game would be good, for example. The next one, Annie, I think really underrated because this champion has low skill ceiling, but is super insane when it comes down to just locking down one target. Next one is Mel. I think Mel is really good if the enemies, for example, pick TF. You are still having long range, and I still think this champion has his angles, for sure. Katarina is full solo queue champion, in my opinion. I think it's pretty good. But yeah, there are a few matchups that are also completely unplayable. But if this champion is in any games, he just gets free kills basically anywhere on the map. Then Zoe, a champion that has insanely high skill ceiling, in my opinion. If you're good on this champion, you can completely destroy your solo queue games. So I like playing this champion. I like having Zoe in my team. So if you are Zoe OTP, congrats, you're playing a really cool champ. Then TF, I think with TF you have a lot of options to impact the map basically. You can also go AP build if you're playing a matchup where you don't feel like going 80, and you can also build the 80 build in mid lane if the enemies are, for example, low range. And then the last one, we're actually having LeBlanc. I think LeBlanc is also a pretty good champion. It's just you need to be really good on her and completely destroy early game. If you're not doing that, I think it will be hard to basically later find angles to actually chunk the enemy or get like a clean one shot. Then let's start with B tier. We have Malzahar. Malzahar also a good champion. When it comes down to lockdown, I think there are simply better options. Like that's why he's B tier, and that's it. Asol is actually getting a buff next patch, so I'm kind of curious to see. Like maybe he's actually getting better, but for now I would say in B tier he's like pretty fine for SoloQ. He's like a really good scaling champion. Same thing kind of goes for Asia. In my opinion, Asia is a really good competitive champion, but not that nice in SoloQ. Yone is a cool champion. I think like Yone and Yasuo, they're like kind of the same. Like if you're on a OTP level, I think they can be like S tier. But like Yone, for example, is more of a top lane champion in my opinion, because the mid lane matchups are like sometimes completely unplayable. Like imagine you would be playing against Akali, like into Cassio, you know, it's really, really hard. And like same thing kind of applies to Yasuo, but like Braun, for example, like I mean, this guy did rank 1 EOS with Yasuo, right? So this champion can probably also be a S tier or Z tier champion if you're really, really good on him. The next one, we're having Echo. I think there are a few Echo mains on the server. He can be pretty good, but also it has like insane skill ceiling. If you're really good on this champion and you are like on an OTP level, then I think honestly every champion in this tier list can be a S tier champion. And usually Echo is like being played into Syndra as a counter pick. So if the enemies pick Syndra blind, you know, and you see good Echo angle, then go for it. Next one, we have Zed. I think 80 mids are just not that popular right now, and it's like kind of hard, but it's same thing again. If you're on OTP level, it's completely fine to play. Then Vel'Koz, I think it's just a worse version of like other mages. I think he has a lot of damage, and that's basically his kit. Then let's go down to C tier. We're having Kiana. I think this champion has a really hard time laning right now. Then Ziggs is basically just a control mage that cannot do anything on mid lane. Like it's completely boring gameplay. You're just chilling. But for example, let's say you're duo Q or something with your AD carry, and you feel like flexing Ziggs, then like worst case, you can actually take the Ziggs mid lane. Then there's Corki. I think Corki is pretty strong right now, but the issue is that obviously into all these mages on mid lane, you cannot really play. And yeah, the only real reason to play Corki is if the enemy is like blind Galio or something, or like blind Cassadin, you know, and you get a good Corki angle, then go for it. Irelia, also more of a top lane champion, in my opinion. I think you're having a hard time mid lane into all these champions, especially because the lane is so short. Then we're actually having Xerath, and I thought about, okay, where do I put Xerath? But in my opinion, like Xerath is also played in the LEC, for example. Like in my opinion, Xerath is even an S-counter champion. Like honestly, if the enemies have a lot of range and you're just chilling like in early game and not dying and using it as a flex, then this champion can be like pretty insane. I would not say he's like an S-counter pick. Like probably he's more of a B or like maybe an A tier pick if you like flex it to AD carry, because you're still having a pretty hard time into like tempo mages and stuff like this. Then we're having Heimerdinger. I think Heimerdinger is not really a viable champion right now, sadly. Maybe into like Silas on mid lane. He's like doing a good job. Then we're having Vex. I think the only reason to pick Vex is like it's the worst version of Talia in my opinion, because you're simply picking this champion if the enemies are like dashing in like into Yasuo matchups or something. And then last one in C tier, we're still having Zilean. I think Zilean is more of a supportive champion, sadly right now, and not really that playable on mid lane. And then the last one is Fizz. He has his own category. I think the champ is like pretty useless and shouldn't be played at all. This is my final tier list. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any sort of questions, feel free to just write in the comments or like write me on Discord. Feel free to check out my Patreon if you're interested in any sort of coaching content where I'm uploading my coachings, and I'm wishing you a nice day. Goodbye.